Welcome in, whiskey freaks, to the Blind Tasting Podcast, your number one attitudinal bourbon destination.
We're interrupting your regular programming to bring you an emergency announcement.
So, I recorded this episode several days ago, and, well, I was gonna drop it in the normal weekly rotation. And what that means is I'll record an episode a few days prior, or maybe even 4 or 5 days prior, and I'll schedule it out to be dropped into the YouTubes, the Apples, all the good places that you see it. You wouldn't have heard this episode for several days if I did that, but this one is kind of like, well, it felt like an emergency to me. And okay, it's not an emergency really in the grand scheme of life, but I'd be remiss. And for those of you with infinity bottles, that means negligent or careless. So I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you kind of just as soon as possible about this next bourbon whiskey. There's a reason for that, and not to give away my verdict, but if you did want to try it, I don't know how long or what type of supply they've got of it, and I want to give you all a shot at it if you so choose to do that. So take a listen. As usual, I do the tasting, I have a verdict, and then you'll have all the info you need to make an informed, intelligent decision about how to spend your hard-earned doll hairs. I'll let the episode speak for itself. Here we go. Hey guys, thanks for listening, subscribing, and spreading the blind tasting gospel. The podcast is growing faster than a Pappy Van Winkle auction. Look, if you haven't subscribed yet on the Apple, the YouTubes, or whatever glowing screen controls your entire life, you, my friend, are a naughty, naughty whiskey freak. And I need you to subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Because if you do, and I drop some hot whiskey news, you're going to be very sad. And I don't want sadness here. So do the thing. Subscribe. Be happy. Today I'm going to crack open. Okay. Well, before I get started, let me tell you a little story. Be story time. So for Christmas, a buddy of mine gave me a Total Wine gift card. So naturally, it's been burning a hole in my pocket. And we needed to run to this town nearby where we live here. It's called Fairview Heights, Illinois. And I thought, what the hell? Let me take the gift card. I'll probably be able to burn it up pretty easily at Total Wine, right? Now, I've only been to that store one other time. And at that time, I was on a mission. I didn't really look around much. And I thought this day was going to be different. I had no agenda other than finding something new or different, or maybe a good deal or something. And that brings me to the bourbon we'll be talking about today. It's called Wolcott Rickhouse Reserve. Wolcott. Wolcott, straight bourbon whiskey. I picked this little puppy up for 34 doll hairs. And it came on a recommendation from some gal that was working at Total Wine. Now, listen, I'm a real man. I don't take suggestions from ladies. Okay, I'm just kidding. This chick was super cool. And she said this was one of her favorites. She had tasted all of the line of the Wolcotts that they have at Total Wine. She said this was her favorite out of those three. It's made by Barton 1792. I thought, well, that's kind of good. Of this line, she said they had a bottled in bond. I think they had a base model bourbon Wolcott. And then this one, Wolcott Rickhouse Reserve. Now, I've heard horror stories of the good folks at Total Wine kind of chasing people around and pushing bad whiskey on people. Whether it be unsuspecting newbies or even seasoned drinkers are sometimes getting duped. And that's what I hear. Again, not my experience. This was not that. I bought this bottle of my own free will, and I picked it up for a couple reasons. Like I said, I don't often take recommendations from randos in the liquor store, but it's been a while since I grabbed something truly different. And, well, it's only $34. So you know my mantra. Well, one of the many things I rant about. Value. I don't usually waste my time reviewing crazy limited releases that, well, you'll never, ever get your hands on. I figure, what's the point of reviewing a whiskey you can't afford? It's like giving a 5-star review to a VRBO mansion when you're still making payments on a single wide. And yeah, I know what you're thinking, but what if I want to enter a raffle for something exclusive? My answer would be, if it's in a raffle, there's a really good chance it's amazing. So do we really need a review to confirm that? If you can't find it, and especially these days, if you can't afford it, then chasing after it just seems like a lot of frustration to me. So I say all that to say I'm holding it in my hands right now because gift card and 34 doll hairs. Oh, and also it's 120 proof, and that caught my eye. So here are the deets. And, well, it's all the deets I could gather from Al Gore's amazing internet in an hour of searching. Yes, I found very little information out there. It was mucho elusive for the Wolcott Rickhouse Reserve. There were several bad reviews out there, and I don't mean that they reviewed the whiskey and they gave it a bad review. I mean, they were just bad. So, guys, you got to do a little bit better out there. So, I think I need to review it today. Let's get the information out there, at least the information that I think ought to be shared. So, like I said, it's Wolcott Rickhouse Reserve Straight Bourbon Whiskey. Again, like I said, it's 120 proof. And for the record, and probably signifying nothing, the bottle says on the front that it's Series 0182. I have no idea what that means. Again, nothing out there on the internet. There was nothing at Total Wine that would explain anything about that either. So, good news, it's a 750 milliliter bottle, which is good. And on the back of the bottle, it says, quote, distilled, aged, and bottled by the Clear Spring Distilling Company, Louisville, Kentucky. What does that really mean? Once again, we got to play the games and I looked it up. Clear Spring Distilling Company. It's located, according to the back of the bottle, it's located in Louisville, Kentucky. It is a subsidiary of the Sazerac Company, and which, as we all know, they own Barton 1792, and they also own Buffalo Trace Distillery. The company, I'm saying the company today is Total Wine. I believe it's an exclusive only put out for Total Wine. And listen, kids, I get nothing from our good friends at Total Wine. I bumped into this, and I really felt like I'd better share it with y'all. That this is not a paid endorsement. I don't review whiskey that's given to me by anyone that has skin in the game, right? A store, a distillery. I buy the stuff. That's how it happens. If I did it any other way, how could you trust me? And that's exactly my point. So anyway, the distillery, like I said, right on the bottle, it says that it's a Clear Spring, whatever. But we know on the front of the bottle, it also says Barton 1792. So, right away, it's got some street cred.
Respect.
The age. Yeah, so I've run out of deets for you, kids, including the age. Now, there's no age statement, but from the color of this thing, and I'm probably jumping ahead here, and I'm looking at it through the bottle, and that's a no-no, as you know, breaking one of my own rules here. Let me pour it real quick so I can get a better look at the color in the glass. Okay. All right. It's in the glass. As you know, we do not gauge the color of whiskey in the bottle. Even though this bottle is mostly clear, the label is not very prominent on there, and you can get a good look at it. We put it in a glass. Taking a look at this one. And I'm using my Limestone Branch Glencairn. My Limestone Branch Glencairn. And you can tell this is young, but looking at the color here, I'm going to guess it's about 4 years old or so. And you're wondering, how did I figure that out? Who said that? Well, I said it. Nobody that I know of has the details. At least nobody's talking if they do. And the colors are like a nice golden amber color. It looks promising at this point. It's Barton stuff. They wouldn't bottle crap, would they? All right, the mash bill. This, too, is a mystery. If we look at Barton's mash bill or their supposed mash bill, like for foolproof, we'd be looking at 75 corn, 10 rye, and 15 malted barley, so a high corn content. I think it would be reasonable to make the assumption that that is their mash bill based on everything I've also learned and seen. I know 1792 foolproof is aged 8.5 years or longer. This color is not dark enough to be that old. But the mash bill certainly could be the same. I think that's a fair assessment. So enough of the fact and figures. I want to see what Wolcott Rickhouse Reserve smells like. Well, let me nose this thing. Right off the bat, it's very sweet, and it's got a solid oakiness to it too. Get some dusty sweet corn, and there's a lot of light fruit coming off of this bad boy. Now, I often get that light fruitiness off a high corn mash bill, like a younger bourbon type of situation, and that's kind of what I think we have here. I've reviewed Starlight Carl T. Huber bourbon before, and I believe it was a 4-year-old. I'm getting things like pear and apricot. Those are the kind of fruits that you're getting off of a younger, higher corn mash bill. And I suspect this is about the same age as that Starlight I reviewed several months ago. Like I said, right around 4 years or so. Makes sense to me. And I'm also getting the slightest floral note, but it's really kind of buried in there with all the other goodies, really. And that proof point, you can definitely tell it's 120. I mean, it's not punching me in the face, but it's like,
yo, how you doing?
Not gonna lie, it's coming off pretty strong. Let me get a sip here and see what we've got on the palate. Keep in mind, I'm going to do probably 3 or more sips here. This is the first sip. It's pretty hot. Again, it's 120 proof. That makes sense. It's warm, but it's got great mouthfeel. It's really coating the mouth, and I like that a lot. I'm also getting rich oak, and, well, naturally, it's very sweet. That makes sense. The presumed 75% corn mash bill, that's probably to blame for that. I'm even getting some rich caramel in here too. Let me get another sip. Sip number 2. Could that be maple syrup? Maple syrupy, maybe? Got a lot of different things on the nose. But at this point in the tasting, I'm not getting a ton of fruitiness. It's sweet, no doubt, it's sweet, but let me get another sip here. I really need another sip to nail this down. Okay, so the maple syrupy note, it's really more like a brown sugary note. So we got rich caramel, strong oaky notes, and just a tinge of fruit in here, like pear or apricot. I think I need one more sip just for shits and grins. So what's my verdict? I'll have the verdict right after the money spot. All right, whiskey freaks, let's be real. This podcast ain't free to make. And my wife, well, she's got questions about where all the money's going. So if you've ever enjoyed an episode here on the Blind Tasting Podcast and thought, man, this guy deserves a drink, well, now here's your chance. Head over to buymeacoffee.com/blindtastingpodcast. Toss a few bucks in the tip jar. It'll keep the podcast rolling, and it helps me prove to my wife that somebody out there thinks this was a good idea. Thanks for the support, whiskey freaks. That's buymeacoffee.com/blindtastingpodcast. Just a buck or two if you love what you're hearing. So appreciated, guys. Cheers to all of you. Now let's get back to the bourbon. So if you've listened to the Blind Tasting Podcast or you haven't listened, there are 3 possible verdict options. Are we going to keep it? Are we going to collect it? Or are we going to cull it? To keep it means to proudly display it in your liquor cabinet or bar. This stuff's good for a pour anytime, but there's no need to stock up on it since it's pretty much always available. Collect it. Grab another bottle or maybe 2 since it's so damn good, or it just may not be easy to get your hands on. Lastly, cull it. Use it to loosen rusty bolts or sanitize a dirty toilet. In the case of Wolcott Rickhouse Reserve, straight bourbon whiskey, I say, keep it. In fact, I'd say get at least 2 bottles of this stuff. Here's my logic, kids. Okay, is it a symphony in your mouth? Well, no, it is not a symphony in your mouth, but is it pretty damn good? Yeah, it's terrific. Is it going to win the Ascot Awards? No, it will not. And I'm guessing the folks in San Francisco at the Whiskey Awards, they're not going to give it a big gold star either. And frankly, I don't know what they do out there, and I don't care what they do. Honestly, I don't pay attention to the awards. That's just me. Alrighty, let's have some extra fun here real quick. I've got a few extra minutes today, and I've also got some 1792 foolproof right here with me, because inquiring minds want to know, how does it compare to the Wolcott? Now, we're assuming the mash bill is the same here. I know that's a big assumption, like I said. The proof points are very close. Foolproof is 125, and you know the Wolcott is 120. So the 1792 we know is at least 8.5 years old or so-ish. And I'm guessing the Wolcott is 4 years. Again, making that assumption. So let me splash some of this foolproof in my glass and see how the Wolcott holds up against it. Okay. So keep in mind, the 1792 foolproof won the 2020 World Whiskey of the Year competition. So we know foolproof has gotten some big accolades. Okay. So right off the bat in my glass, I'm looking at the color of the foolproof, comparing it to the Wolcott. It's got a much deeper hue than the Wolcott. I mean, you can tell it's older right away. I've talked about that. You can tell by the hue of the whiskey in your glass, what the breadth of flavors are going to be in your mouth. Clearly, there is a difference here. So let me give it a quick nosing. Yeah, so right away, I don't get as much alcohol off the nose as I did from the Wolcott. Again, the Wolcott, the alcohol coming off the Wolcott wasn't unpleasant, but you could tell it was there. I mean, it was making a statement. The foolproof, very little alcohol on the nose. Let me get a sip of the foolproof real quick. Okay. Oh yeah. Yeah, no surprise here really, kids. This foolproof, it's got a richer caramel flavor, a deeper flavor, and it's even got a better mouthfeel. Now, like I said, that Wolcott, terrific mouthfeel. This is even better. Makes sense. It's a lot older, probably double the age. And this foolproof's got a more developed profile. I'm getting things here like barrel char. You can't find that in the Wolcott. That was not there. And it kind of makes sense. Duh, it's double the age. Let me sip the foolproof one more time. Yeah, it's more developed. You got some things like clove and even a tinge of chocolate on the finish. The foolproof just has more going on. It's great stuff. There's no doubt. Okay, the Wolcott. So it's a few proof points lower, but it's got a more candied sweetness to it than this foolproof, in my opinion. And even though the nose tricked me just a bit, and okay, what do I mean by that? You've heard me use the term double-crossed. That's my term. That's when the nose does not jibe completely with the palate, and the taste is really terrible, even though the nose was amazing, or at least not bad. And that's not exactly what we have here. The nose on the Wolcott, to me, was far more complex than the notes I'm getting on the palate. And yet the Wolcott still, it's holding its own. So it's not a double cross per se. It's just not as complex on the palate as it was on the nose. That's kind of the feeling I had. And this is the reality I'm getting. Look, this bottle only sets you back 34 doll hairs. Foolproof, it's going to be at least 69, 70, sometimes $75. And that's if you can bribe the dude behind the counter at the liquor store. Okay. You might say, well, you get what you pay for. And in my opinion, for the money, the sheer bang for your buck, you got to grab a Wolcott Rickhouse Reserve. Or like I said, grab 2 bottles, and that's while you can. Unless you're a wuss and you can't handle high proofers. Just kidding, kids. Nobody that listens here is a wuss. If you don't care for a high proofer, maybe you should pass. And yeah, it's a bit youthful, but the sweet heat is a nice treat. I say if you live near a Total Wine, you should get it. You should try it. I think you'll enjoy it. Last but not least, I got to give a shout out to the farmers, the distillery production guys and gals, the warehouse workers, the bottlers, and the truck drivers. They're the ones that make it happen. So cheers to all of them. Well, that's all I got for today, Whiskey Freaks. Thanks for listening to the Blind Tasting Podcast, your #1 attitudinal bourbon destination.